I love Shin Megami Tensei 3 Nocturne. It's a great game and it's personally my first Shin Megami Tensei game. The game tells an interesting story about the philosophies of different people and what it looks like when those philosophies are pushed to the extreme. What the average fan might not know is that the version that we got in the West wasn't the original version of the game that was released in Japan. That version actually did not have Dante, the Fiends, or True Demon ending. Even more unusual is that there were also alphas and betas that were found in the game's data. And even more vexing than that, there are scripts and story drafts that didn't go past the conception. You get it? Conception? Today, let's talk about the Shin Megami Tensei 3 alpha types. The history of this is kind of weird because initially there wasn't gonna be more past Shin Megami Tensei if you could imagine that. So initially they planned to just release SMT 1, 2, if, and then start with a new series. But that being said, they still started development of Nocturne as early as 1994, shortly after the release of Shin Megami Tensei If. So that prep work for Shin Megami Tensei 3 Nocturne was delayed in lieu of working on Devil Summoner 1 and Persona 1 as well. They would resume the development process in 1998 with what appears to be the oldest possible documents surviving from Shin Megami Tensei Nocturne's development. And these are shown in fragments in Megaten Maniacs. Before we get started, Megaten Maniacs is a book featured in the 25th anniversary edition of Deep Strange Journey, and this book chronicles the history of Shin Megami Tensei as well as some of the outliers and spin-offs, and it's quite a hefty piece of merchandise if you really want to learn about Shin Megami Tensei's lore. Unfortunately, it's in Japanese, so you're kind of asked out if you don't speak or read Japanese. Luckily for you, I translated as much as I could. The first page tells an interesting story. The setting is the future, just past the year 2000. Civilization now resides underground and has not developed at all. It's just been stagnant. But there hasn't been some sort of world-changing event just yet. This is the sort of environment where the boys grew up. The boys were born in a time where it was silly to have hope. They grew up in a society with high-level education, emotional flair, and they grew up to be kind of like societal monsters. The boys dreamed of the destruction of the world. This wasn't a dream that they came up with on their own volition. This is actually a dream that was introduced to them via the man. The man helped them build this dream up and offered them a solution to the destruction of the world. That man gave them the power of the devil, or the devil's power. The devil's power was used to carry out a prophecy, which would then cause the destruction of the world, and it destroyed the world completely. Demons then flooded Earth, and the world became chaotic. The boys then also made a contract with the devil, the contract being that they would be able to live in a peaceful land for as long as they could measure time. The fulfillment of that prophecy evoked the Great Will's intervention. The power that brought the prophecy in ancient times sent the soldiers of God, and the ground became even more scary. The demons were sent away back to the Expanse, and that's also where the boys went. There, the boys learned the knowledge of the relationship between God and the devil human with the demon power. God creates new beings, and he begins to kind of enhance them and experiment with them. Those left behind are just the remnants of God's army, as well as some surviving humans who are also being tested. There are also demons in the demon world that flow into the outer universe. These demons are demons with a much higher level of wisdom, and they speak words that are unfathomable to the average person. The boys never returned to Earth after this point, and the Earth is just a scorched Earth, completely changed, and the only people left, like I said, are the angels who are doing rehabilitation work. And now the surviving things or spirits are just pre-world ending dwellers who resemble remnants of thought. This one was kind of a tough read, if only because my translation is not the strongest. I'm not fluent in Japanese. But I think that there's a couple of things that kind of jump out. I think the way they frame the way the boys view the world is a lot like how Hikawa views the world in Nocturne. And I think that the spirits that kind of remain at the end of the world are kind of like the spirits that we see in the Conception. They also mention a boy gaining demonic power, a devil human, and I think that's essentially the earliest indication of this demi-fiend-like character. So that concept was integrated into Nocturne as early as 1998. So alongside that short summary, there's also some notes, most of which is just bizarre and difficult to understand, but one that I thought was interesting was the Curse of Abel. I tried to research what they meant by this because, as far as I know, it's actually called the Curse of Cain, but according to Alice's interpretation, the Curse of Abel states that Cain's descendants are all destined to fail and die. This premise is also built on addressing themes such as the end of the century, people who long for the destruction of the world. They want to use some sort of mass extinction event similar to Ragnarok, and they mention using weapons such as Leviathan, Fenrir, Chernabog, Lucifer, or Satan. The last really interesting chunk of notes for that version is the mention of demonoids. Demonoids are essentially humans who turn into demons, and these are humans that were decided are special, and they're able to adapt and become semi-demonic, a concept that we see in later games. That's pretty much it for that version, but let's look a little bit deeper. These are 6 short little outlines of potential stories. Most of them are just premises, or they're just mentioning the establishment of a certain tone for the game. So number 1, the game will be set in Tokyo with a high level of realism and a sympathetic tone. Number 2, the city will reflect the world's destruction and go through a drastic change. The events will be the end of the century in the vein of the Great Flood, missile launches, or criminal outbursts. 3, the world will be divided into different areas by religion, such as Greek, Jewish, and Egyptian. There's also places that you can go depending on your progress in the story. 4, a world where demons already appeared and live in harmony with humans. However, at the present, there are some tensions building up, and demons are persecuted, with some humans believing that humans are superior to demons. Number 5, it's set in a different time or a different set of times in which time exists in rings. Each time ring kind of overlaps, so then it would be modern Tokyo inside of a ring of Tokyo 30 years after, so on and so forth. And it's also possible to exist in multiple Tokyos at the same time. I find that one interesting because the layered world building is something that we see in Shin Megami Tensei Strange Journey. And the last one, number 6, a city has come down from heaven on the Day of Judgment. This is New Jerusalem, appointed as the base for the angels. The city is located in a different dimension, which it enters from a space torn in the sky. So a lot of these little outlines are interesting. Things shift around a bit. A lot of these themes we see mentioned are used in future games, and some of them are integrated into Nocturne. So half a year since the plot proposal, they did a new story proposal set. These were written using ideas and concepts formed from the initial plot proposal. There are 9 of these in total, and I'm going to read them all out to you. Number 1, transportation, time-space flight from a devastated future and the return. The game starts with a place of devastated future that is similar to Shin Megami Tensei 2. Human beings have fallen into a state of near extinction due to great battles that have taken place decades ago. The extremely highly advanced technological and magical civilization that once existed doesn't really exist anymore, only in ruin. The protagonist, however, is born from the surviving people, and he gains the power of the demon summoning program from relics, and he uses that to pave his way through the demon world. He obtains the technique of using space and time to travel, and this comes at a cost. You're only able to travel through space and time via your soul. You cannot do that and also retain your body, so your body is left behind, your soul is able to travel. When he travels back into the past, he travels all the way back to the end of the 20th century, and this travel causes him to lose his memories, and that sucks. But then eventually he starts gaining his memories back. Once he retains his memories, he starts to investigate demons and magic and what will bring about the end of the world. After this development, he returns back to the future and the game ends on him chasing a demon that also went from the past to the future. Number 2, the memory hidden in the dream. The shadow of the city looms. The people who live there are no different from modern day people, and this is the kind of world the hero was born in. Except in this world, people don't have the ability to dream. But for whatever reason, the hero was born with the ability to dream. One day he told other people and they reported them to the authorities. This resulted in him getting captured and taken to a facility. And in this facility, they basically try to research and figure out why he's able to dream. His dreams are always constant. They're always of the 20th century. In there, Japan is in turmoil. In the dream, he's the protagonist, and he gains the demon summoning program. The goal of the story is for him to be able to figure out why people can't dream in his world and what the deal is with this foreign world of the past Tokyo. Number 3, virtual home, virtual Tokyo created in the demon world. This is set in SMT2 or shortly after, and Tokyo is remade in the demon world. Basically, it looks exactly like Tokyo in the 20th century, but in the distance you can see demonic looking mountains. If you look up, the sky is purple. A boy is raised in this Tokyo, and he has no experience outside of this version of Tokyo. He's taught to be strong, and he's trained in various ways to become a pretty competent warrior. Soon, the Oracle of the city relays a message that the city will be invaded. This is where we learn the secret of the city, and the secret is that it was formed by Masakado. It was a place to build a warrior in preparation for Earth and Earth's conflict with the demon world. The game then goes through the protagonist going to Earth and different other demon worlds to gain power. The hero also wants to basically save Tokyo by bringing it back to Earth. Number 4, drifting Tokyo falling into the Makai. Shortly after the transition into the 21st century, there was a mass extinction level weapon launched at Tokyo by a foreign power, and after this missile is launched, Tokyo disappears. But it's not destroyed, however. It's actually sent to the Makai. In the demon realm, the protagonist receives the demon summoning program, and he receives it from a mysterious entity or person, and the whole game is him searching how to return Tokyo back to the human world, or I guess the real world. Number 5, lifelike prizes, human-like life forms that keep reincarnating. In the future, the 22nd century, human-like life forms evolve and they make reincarnation possible. Humans use these beings for war against demons, as well as to basically make body modifications to themselves. One day, the protagonist begins to question his existence and desires the death of his soul. However, when venturing into the demon world, his body is taken over by a demon. This one is really interesting because it reminds me of the story in Shin Megami Tensei Imagine. Kind of like the dream one, kind of reminds me of Shin Megami Tensei 9. Number 6, the apocalyptic world created by the modern generation. The story of this game centers around the young generation who struggle to deal with the world left behind to them by the older generation. They acquire the devil's power, or potentially the demon summoning program. They use this to cause the destruction of the world. They can't take over the world, however. They are chased into the demon world. Meanwhile, Yahweh becomes the overlord of Earth. Number 7, future and beyond the chaos world. A world where demons and humans exist peacefully starts to de-evolve into chaos. People are aiming for the revival of the world. Meanwhile, demons are aiming for a return to power. Demons begin to form communities, and some communities war with each other. Some demons call for the power of God to save them. Meanwhile, others look for Lucifer to save them. Number 8, gods existing in space. This one's kind of bizarre. The dwelling place of the primordial divine being is the sun, or another planet, the final phase of the cosmic scale. I don't really know what they mean with this one. In vague terms, it kind of reminds me of Digital Devil Saga. And the last one is number 9, Planet Demon, the story of those who became gods. It is set in the 5th Ascent Star, which was the source of the civilization of Earth, tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of years ago. The existence called God or Satan on the present Earth is active on the fifth sense star. In the fifth sense star, at the stage where everyone is about to make the voluntary evolution, a conflict has begun regarding the desire for that method and the relationship of power and evolution. After this conflict, civilization is moved to Earth. This seems like an origin story to God or Satan, and even weirder, I just don't get it. It reminds me kind of Devilman, how demons existed on Earth before humans did. Now, all of those, I think we can safely say very wildly in the level of depth they go in, as well as basically what commonalities they have. A lot of them involve, for some reason, Tokyo going to the demon world. Go figure. But now we're at the final stretches of these various pitches. And these ones all come from one of Alice's finest writers, Shogo Isogai. If you don't know him, just know that like at least 4 characters in the Megaten franchise are based off of him. So he's kind of a big deal. His first story goes, the hero is put in a cold sleep and thawed out after a period of time. Since his body was the only thing preserved in the cold sleep, he has his body taken over by an evil spirit who kills the doctor who wakes him up. That doctor actually created the main character, thus known as the mind demonoid, by extracting brain data and incorporating it with a cultured demonoid. The reasons for doing this vary from love of a woman, wanting to create new creatures, exploring the possibility of eternal life, or just simply wanting to make the main character stronger. This next one is about a world governed by Yahweh. So the world is the world of God. There exists law, neutral, and chaos, but those are all different from the law of Yahweh. God can appear on this earth through Yahweh, Stephen, or Tao Sheng Laojin. This world is the world of God. In this world, law, neutral, and chaos exist, but those are all separate from the law of Yahweh. God can appear on earth through various means. God appears through Yahweh, Stephen, or Tai Sheng Laojin. In addition, Lucifer has the Makai realm, the hero has the dream world, and that world is also considered to be a sort of Makai. The hero in this story could either be God or Lucifer. I find this one interesting because they say God and they separate that from Yahweh. I think this is kind of before they really established the Great Will. This one's also kind of vague. It talks about a past character who is a character who's appeared in Shin Megami Tensei 1, 2, and If, and this person is from the world of Shinagawa. The character appears in the dream world of the protagonist. When the main character opens the door to reality, the past character is brought into the dream world. The past character will also be revived in the real world. Okay, so that one's kind of weird. So it's safe to say that the first one vaguely reminds me of that scene in Nocturne where you're force-fed the Magatama. I think Isagai's pitches are kind of interesting, if not a little playful. So now let's look into the not-so-distant future. In the year 2000, at Tokyo Game Show, Atlas R&D1, that's the team responsible for Persona and Shin Megami Tensei, before they reorganized as P Studio and Development Team 1 and Studio 0. So they showed off an entitled project that could literally be translated as Network Features Research and Development Piece. This trial production seemed to be testing for the LAN and networking features of the PS2, and curiously, they used a model of Cerberus to play with. According to the Nocturne documentary, this was done to test how to interpret the art of Megaten for the 3D space, determining the look and controls as well. I'm pretty thankful that they did this because if you compare this model of Cerberus to the one we got in the game, I think the cel shaded style suits Kaneko's art style a lot better. For the next chapter of the development story of Nocturne, we got this new iteration of some sort of demo, but unlike that Cerberus one, this one is weird because it has the workings of a story, and things like the UI and art seem to be a lot more defined, closer to what we got in the final. So the script for this demo was still left in, and it was found by people at the cutting room floor as well as the Lost Media wiki, and those two places are integral to understanding basically what was there. The cutting room floor describes 11 scenes and 1 game over segment. I'm going to read to you guys the description that comes from the Lost Media Wiki. The game would begin by Anat awakening Demi-Fiend by the power of Devil Hearts. Interesting to note, the Devil Hearts concept was basically just prototypical Magatama, and funny enough, they actually named one of the Lucifer pieces for Shin Megami Tensei Nocturne's promo Devil Hearts, as a reference to that possibly, or maybe it's a reference to Angel Hearts, which is where the name Louis Cypher comes from. So anyways, Anat awakens Demi-Fiend in order to tell him to kill Amaterasu, who is trying to hunt down a treasure and make Dark Tokyo her own. Dark Tokyo being a prototypical Vortex realm, I guess. Demi-Fiend would meet Take Mikazuchi, who tells him that Amaterasu is cursed by Anat, and because of her grief she hid in a monkey enclosure at the Ueno Zoo. This would later become Yoyogi Park, by the way. He then tells Demi-Fiend that he needs to find a treasure to undo the curse of Amaterasu. You would then get 2 choices. You could either side with Take Mikazuchi and help Amaterasu, or you can go along with that original plan of killing her that Anat wanted. If you decide to help save Amaterasu, Demi-Fiend would then cross the waters of the Shinobazu Pond and meet Nue, which after negotiating he would help Demi-Fiend navigate to the depths of the pond. Demi-Fiend would go to the bottom and find a tunnel with a cave. At the end of that cave there's a treasure. He would return that to Take Mikazuchi, and he would then undo the curse and the demo would end. That version, by the way, is essentially chapter 1 of Raido Kuzunoa versus the Soulless Army. You gotta go into the mansion, you go underground, you find Tarask, you get him to take you across, you go all the way down, you find this treasure, and you complete the story in chapter 1. I think that's very interesting that that story lines up so closely with this Amaterasu story. However, on the flip side, if you stick with Anat's plan, Demi-Fiend would then have to kill Take Mikazuchi and find out that Amaterasu escaped to the Imperial Palace. By negotiating with demons, you can find out where that is, and there's a barrier in your way, unfortunately. Anat appears and breaks that barrier, and then you fight Amaterasu. Once defeated, the demo ends. Ashino explains that this particular iteration of Nocturne was designed to basically fine-tune how the players moved and to explain some of the oddities of Persona 2, Shin Megami Tensei 2, and Devil Summoner characters appearing in the files for the game. The lead designer, Makoto Katano, stated they used this to kind of figure out how to best represent Kaneko's art. They also used it to practice facial emoting because the character models for the actual characters in the game weren't completed at the time. A lot of the reason why there's many alpha builds for this and also the scripts is because Kaneko and Okada believed that it's really important to build a strong foundation for a game and then build upon that, with staff such as Shogo Isogai admitting that they broke many of the alpha builds in their tests. They came to understand that this is essential to creating a successful project, making and breaking and then improving with each iteration. They also mentioned that the process of creating the alphas also helped them determine the best way to use cell shading to then light Kaneko's art style and create dimensionality in each scene. The programmers were very proud of the technique that allowed them to create drama and different lighting effects by casting red light, for instance, and that would then leave a blue shadow. This was used, again, like I said, to create dimensionality, and I think it works very well. Nocturne is one of the most striking visually, and I think it's just cool to look at. I mean, that's redundant, I guess. The process for creating this took them about 6 months. And based on everything I read from the Megaten Maniacs, I don't think the Anat versus Amaterasu story was actually a draft that was abandoned. I think it was just a simple story they wanted to use in order to get out a bunch of the different ways of developing different ideas they had. And what better way to do that than have an actual story so then you could work on other functions and have a context for it all. Anyway, that's it for the video. I've worked on this for months. If you remember, I posted way back a long time ago about this, but I delayed it even more and felt even more apprehensive after the announcement of Shin Megami Tensei 3 Nocturne HD Remaster, if only because it's going to include the real Ayakashi monthly special issue. It's going to be about 106 pages, and it's going to be included in the limited edition release of that game. And the reason why I got apprehensive is because that book is being written by Nobuyuki Shiota. Nobuyuki Shiota also wrote the Megaten Maniacs, the book that I took a lot from in order to put together this video. As a result, I feel like that book is going to be very dense in terms of information, and as a result, I think that I might have to do an addendum to this video to basically add on or correct any information that I got wrong, either by mistranslating or by not having the full story. So yeah, there might be a part 2 to this video. I might also do other videos like this where I talk about the development of different Megaten games, because Megaten Maniacs goes over a couple of them. If you want me to do that, let me know. Also, I want to know which one of those drafts you kind of like the most. Personally, I liked all the Shogo Isekai stuff, and the weird time travel things kind of got me too. The Amaterasu versus Anat thing was kind of interesting in concept, but I don't think it was very good in execution. So I'm glad that that was not what we got. Also, don't forget to follow me on Twitter, Did You Know Tensei. It's really important that you do that, I guess. But it's even more important if you subscribe. So go ahead and do that. And that's it for the video. Goodbye, fellow Megatenists.